Welcome to this Creative Instinct podcast production made for the Cambridgeshire Recovery Service, one of a series made by people navigating their recovery journey, driven by people who have been there and recognise the way.
It's hard really to understand where it all began. So I'd been and still am married for a number of years, and I'd always known that my husband was a drinker. He liked to drink. You know, he went to university, played rugby well into his 40s. We socialised. He had a very good job, lots of corporate hospitality. And I knew he drank. And there were times that I noticed more and more how much he was drinking, and that when we were at parties, he was the one that always got drunk so quickly. He would drink alcohol rapidly and became drunk and always went home early, so I was always left, you know, at barbecues with families, friends, with the children, and he would take himself off home. And this progressed for years. Unfortunately, he had some upset in his life with regard to work through no fault of his own. Just reshuffling of staff, and that he became a victim of, and he didn't take it very well. And I think that's when his drinking increased. One morning, I was in the kitchen and he was in the kitchen, and our youngest daughter came downstairs and she started to cry. And I said to her, "What on earth is the matter?" And she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you it in front of Dad, because I'm really scared and I'm really cross with him." Now, her bedroom was above one of the living rooms in our house, and she told me, with him present, that every morning she heard him opening cans from about 5 o'clock in the morning. And I confronted him and he didn't deny it, he couldn't deny it. And I remember walking out of the door in despair, thinking, what's he doing? And my parents are buried not far from our house, and I walked over and I told them. And I was so angry with him. Why would he do that? Why would our daughter have kept that to herself? Because she was scared. You know, she was a teenager, she was scared, and she wanted it to stop. But she didn't want to get him into trouble. So then that's when I realised we've got some real problems now. And I was working full time, and I was going into work. He wasn't working. And it got to the point that I was too scared to go home because I didn't know what I was going to find. And he had gone into a deep depression. And this lasted for a good few years, this depression, in and out of it. Therapies, private therapies, some worked, some didn't. But the drinking was always at the heart of it, because that was his way of coping with his feelings. And then we discovered that he was hiding his drinking more and more. He would hide cans and bottles in his car. He would distribute them around the village in different dustbins and forget where he'd hidden them. And then we would discover them, and every time this happened, he denied that it was ever him. That he wouldn't possibly do that. He couldn't be doing that. He didn't drink like that. And it caused, as you can imagine, a lot of upset in the home and the family. Arguments, despair. He knows this now. I didn't tell him at the time, but when I used to leave work, I never used to go home. Not directly. I used to drive for miles because I was too scared to go home to what I found. Now, he was not a violent man in any way, shape or form, but he was emotionally abusive and would tell me that I was going mad, I was imagining things, deny being drunk when he couldn't even stand up, and he would still deny drinking. He began to spend a lot of time in bed, and he would go to bed and he would sleep, and then he would get up again. And then when he'd stopped hiding his drinking, he would just drink again. It was drink, sleep, repeat. And that became his life. I took him to the doctors. The doctor told him his drinking was a problem. And then he collapsed one day at home. And I rang an ambulance, and he spent 9 days in hospital. And the consultants told him then that he couldn't drink, he shouldn't drink. And he came home and he lasted probably 5 weeks without alcohol. And then it started again, but this time it was worse. The frequency of the drinking increased. He would disappear, saying he was taking the dog out for a walk. And he'd come back and I'd challenge him. Had he been drinking? No. But I could smell it. I think the worst thing, the lies. They were unbelievable. The lies were so atrocious. And when you love somebody so much and they're doing that to you and your children, it's really, really hard to understand how anybody could do that. So in the beginning, we would have shouting matches and I would scream and would shout at him. He would shoo me away. He treated me really badly. And I began to lose who I was as an individual, as a mother, as a wife, as a woman. Where did it all go wrong? Why is he doing this? Why are we in this situation? We have an amazing family. We have no financial issues. I even gave up. I took early retirement to help him through this terrible illness. And I didn't work for a couple of years. And then the place that I worked at, they rang me one day and asked if I could go and help out. And I did, and whilst I was there, they sort of coaxed me back into going back to work for them. I was exhausted, mentally and physically exhausted from trying to support my husband. And I needed something for me. So I went back to work, thinking that would help me, and maybe for a few months it did. I think actually what it was that I felt important enough to somebody again, that somebody would want me to go back, that somebody needed me for something. But I soon realised that me being out of the house gave him licence to do whatever he wanted. There were days I came back and he was so drunk. I would open the front door and I would look at him and he would stare at me like I was a complete and utter stranger. I'd come back, there was glass smashed all over the floor. Him half in a chair, half out of it, couldn't stand up, yet still denied that he'd had a drink. I used to call friends and they came over and used to help me get him up the stairs into bed. What people don't realise is when you're that dependent on alcohol, it affects their body dramatically. So they stop eating and they replace everything with drink. And then that drink affects their bodily functions. Anyway, he started to turn grey again, and his health was really, really suffering again. So he ended up back in hospital, probably another 3 or 4 times, being admitted. Still hiding alcohol. Still lying constantly, saying that he cared and loved his family, but not doing anything to show us that that was the case. He stopped caring about his appearance. He stopped helping in the house. His whole world revolved around vodka or cider. Or both. Some days both. The vodka was for him to get the quick hit. The cider took longer. But it got worse. It got far worse. He would be drunk by 7 o'clock in the morning, trying to climb the stairs, and he'd collapse outside the bedroom door. I'd find him. Our daughters would come out of their rooms and see him, and he would still lie. He wasn't drunk. We were stupid. We were stupid people. We were making it up. He wouldn't do that to us. Well, we didn't care about him. We were having a go at him all the time. Why did we care about him? All you ever do is have a go at me. You're lying about me. I had friends who cared about me, who used to see him hiding things in bins. And in the end, they stopped protecting him and they came and told me. And I'm glad they did, because I'd rather have honesty. Because I was being told so many lies by him. I had some decisions to make, and I didn't know where to go or what to do, and I tried to do everything on my own because I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed. This man, my husband, this man had turned our lives upside down. And he would cut back for a while. He would say, right, I'll only have so many cans today, and I used to support that. And I eventually took him back to the doctors, and she was amazing. His new doctor was amazing. And she was straight with him. She basically said, if you don't stop doing this, you're going to die. He'd been diagnosed with more serious illnesses caused by his drinking. But it still didn't stop. The thought of death? No. I used to say to him, and this might sound really awful, I used to say to him, why don't you just take a pot of pills and be done with it? Oh no, I wouldn't do that. I would never kill myself. I said, well, what are you doing now? What are you doing? You are killing yourself. Anyway, it had a massive, massive impact on our relationship, the relationship with our daughters and their partners and our friends. We stopped being invited places, or if there was an invitation, it was for me only, because people didn't want him round, and I don't blame them. Anyway, he came to CGL, reluctantly at first, and he eventually went into his first medical detox. And our daughter was getting married in May, and he went in the February, and he'd promised her that he would be sober for her wedding. So he went in for 10 days, really positive. Within a month, I suspected that he was hiding alcohol again, but not enough for him to be inebriated. But again, there was a smell. And anyway, we got to our daughter's wedding, and he was just amazing that day. He was in a great mood. His speech was fantastic. He enjoyed the whole day and didn't touch a drop of alcohol. But oh boy, were we in for an awakening after that. My whole world came crashing down. And he drank from morning till night, every day, 7 days a week. I took his credit cards off him. I took his wallet off him. Oh, he found ways. He found ways. Anyway, it got worse. And worse. By now, I'd given up my job again. At his request. Because he wanted me at home. He would get better if I was at home. So I gave up my job again. I don't know if I have enough words to say how scared I was. Scared of the situation, scared of him drinking, scared of the person he turned into. I don't refer to him as my husband when he's drunk. I refer to him as the monster. And the monster came out. And the monster came out every day. In various degrees. And it was scary. This monster was scary. And every time he promised me and the girls something, he let us down again and again and again. And I saw our girls, who were no longer living at home, they'd moved out and couldn't wait to get away, to be frank. I saw them suffer. I saw their pain. And I thought, why can't I protect them? Why can't I protect them from this monster? But I became ill. I became very, very ill. And I started to have major, major panic attacks where I couldn't breathe. And he saw me like this. He saw the way I was. But it didn't stop him. And I don't know whether this is a right thing or a wrong thing, but when you live with somebody like that, you don't want them to be seen outside. People had seen him, but he was in such a state now, I didn't want him outside my house. So I used to go and buy his alcohol to keep him indoors. He was still coming to CGL. His licence had been taken away. So then he's dependent on me taking him to all his hospital appointments, his CGL appointments. He was on a course to decrease his alcohol, but then he had decided that he needed another medical detox. And right up until the day I took him for his second detox, he was drinking excessively. One day I dialed 111 because he hadn't eaten for 6 days. All he'd done was drink. And by this time it was just cider, because I would not buy him vodka, I would only buy him cider. But he'd get through a case of 20 a day easily. No nutrition inside of him. I was watching him decline. How he hasn't died, I don't know. But I'm sit watching the man that I love destroy himself, the father of my children. And his children are looking at him saying, "You're not my dad. Who are you?" And I ended up living with a stranger who I didn't understand. One day, he was just being so obnoxious, tormenting me, playing music, because at this time I'd said, "I've had enough, I can't carry on anymore, we've got to go our separate ways." And he hated that, because I'd taken some control. And it was so bad one day I actually got on my knees in front of him and I begged him to stop drinking. And this went on for about 20 minutes, me begging on my knees. Of course he didn't like that. Just get up off the floor, get up, you stupid woman, get up. One of the hardest things I've found is that he doesn't remember half of it. He doesn't remember it. Does that make it all right? No. It doesn't make it all right. And I said to him the other day, I said, "I know you say you don't remember half of it. Unfortunately for me, I remember all of it. And that's tough. Because it must be nice to go, well, I don't remember that, so I don't have to think about that." And one of the things I know with him and his groups, and I absolutely agree with this, you've got to move forward. You can't look into the past. You've got to move forward. If you're going to get better, you've got to move forward. And I agree with that. He does. But he left me in the past. I was still in the past as he's moving forward. I'm still in the past, as are my girls. And like I said earlier, I lost who I was. I don't know who I am. I've lost my confidence. I used to be so confident. I used to play a lot of sport, out all the time. And I started isolating myself. Because it's easier to isolate yourself than have to explain to somebody what's going on in your life. Because again, the shame is there. I kept so much of it from my family. My family never knew. They know now. It had to come to a point where I had to tell them and ask for some support. But the support they give you can only be limited because they're not there, they're not living it. They can only hear about it, but they're not living it. And until you are living it, it's a very difficult thing to explain, because I want to turn round and say, I hate him, but I don't. Why don't I? And that's because I've always loved him. And I've always wanted to help him. But it's become increasingly difficult. And so, where it all began was our daughter being brave enough to tell us what she'd heard, and that she couldn't lie about it anymore. There's more to my story. I don't know if I can say much more today.
Your story can help others, and we'd love to hear it. Wherever you've been, wherever you are, how you got there. Whatever, it's up to you.